I don't know how much of a gamer you actually are, if you've noticed this trend, but do you think that, maybe narrative design there's shrinking opportunities in narrative design and scripting of story in games, given the fact that like there's this push towards, service-based games that are just basically like, you can't have, they've tried it, but you can't have a narrative-based game that's like a game as a service that needs constant content updates, right? It's like you need some sort of algorithmic,
I think they tried the
loot box dynamic.
Yeah, I don't. The game industry and opportunities seem so volatile and hard to predict that I'm not really sure. What individual things impact the availability or prevalence of one type of rating versus another, just from my own experience and perspective. But I feel like it it ebbs and flows. I mean, when we did Until Dawn, no one wanted it. No one wanted narrative games at all. It was just like early previews. People thought it was interesting and cool, but they were like, "This is a walking simulator. Why would I want to play this?" Then right before Until Dawn came out, Life is Strange came out, and that was doing really well. And then Until Dawn came out, developed concurrently, but kind of doing a similar thing.
Yeah.
And did way better than people expected. I think in part because of old YouTube Let's Plays, like people streaming it. And so like no one could have predicted that being like what made it, take off. And then for a while you would see a lot of really narrative stuff. And I feel like that's tapered off, but I don't know why. I do feel like, I always think about it like this, like when I sit down at night after I've had a long day and I put my kid to sleep now because I have a kid and I'm an adult and I'm tired. Do I want to watch something or play something or both? Or watch something while I'm playing something? And like they're all valid things that depending on the evening I feel like doing. 20 or 30 years ago, people didn't grow up with games. But we've all grown up with games now. Like anybody who's, in their 50s or younger has grown up with games being part of their life for their whole life. So when I unwind, like gaming is a equally important part, to like my unwinding as like any other thing. So I feel like there will always be a need for narrative games, just from that perspective, that point of view, like the daily use day, day in, day out kind of life thing. But that doesn't always drive where the money comes from. So
Well, I just feel like Hollywood and my friends who work in film, I'm somewhat envious of how films get made versus games, because it blows my mind how films get made. Because a lot of them get made on an idea.
Yeah.
And then they just sign a deal, and then somehow the movie gets made. Whereas, like, I've very rarely seen games approved in that way.
Yeah.
But it seems like Hollywood has a much more predictive model to look at a narrative and go, "Oh, I think this will work."
Yeah.
Whereas, like in games, the narrative is just one part of the game.
Right.
There's so many different elements that go into whether this game will be successful that it's harder to sort of justify developing that kind of a game.
Right, exactly. And, like when you look at something that's like a first-person shooter or a multiplayer game or any online service, there's like a back end to what the game is that keeps that business model alive. You're creating an engine for a business model versus a narrative game, which is like you're creating an experience that it's not exactly the same, but it's like you're selling tickets to, and you'll play a few times, once, twice. But it's not a sustainable thing. So I do feel like, Until Dawn, The Quarry, those were 10, 12-hour games. And I think people were frustrated at the time because they were short compared to what you would spend $50, $60 on for like a Final Fantasy or something. It was like a 100-hour game.
Yeah.
But and just going back to like the idea of like what I feel like doing at night, like my biggest frustration with narrative games is not having any idea where I am in the narrative. Like when I'm watching a movie or a TV show, I know where I am in the narrative. I know that I'm 40 minutes in, and I know there's probably 10 minutes left. In a game, I might have no idea.
Yeah.
And so you don't know, like that is friction to me. So I feel like there is an unexplored potential of like 2-hour narrative games that have a lot of branching, a lot of, viability for replayability, and doing really interesting things that we've done previously in The Quarry and Until Dawn, those kind of longer games. I think the Supermassive game series, the Dark Pictures, which I worked on the first one, those are 5-ish hour games. The problem, and so that you know, is to me like an interesting step towards a shorter, more manageable experience. But the problem is that the games are so expensive. They're way more expensive to make a game like Until Dawn or the Quarry. I don't think you could make a 2-hour one and sell it for the same price, and like people would be very frustrated that it was only 2 hours. So that's a code that I don't think has been cracked yet. The like hyper narrative branching movie length experience.
That's actually a good question. Do you think the budget for Until Dawn, adjusted for inflation, was bigger than the budget for the movie?
Oh, I'm not even adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, so the game budget was way bigger than the film budget.
I don't know what the game budget was, but it was. I do know the ballpark, and it was I want to say at least a third bigger, if my pounds correction is correct. But that's not even true, because that was PS3 and the PS4 version, which I take it to all be one big development cycle. Because So I mean, it was probably a lot more, probably 2 or 3 times as much at least.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. And then I feel like that's another thing I feel with film versus the game's business model is film, even though the DVD physical market has kind of disappeared, there's still a lot more ways to monetize a film than there are a game, because there's streaming, there's still TV licensing rights. There's all these different places to put a movie, which actually are kind of already known. So when they kind of figure out the budget and the business model of a film, they kind of can make an accurate estimate of what the return is.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of games come out today where they're just shocked at like how little it sold, and then, well, that's it. That's your only opportunity to monetize this game.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I think that Pete Samuels, who was the head of Supermassive, and the Dark Pictures was kind of his thing, and he created that in reaction to how expensive Until Dawn was. And one of the most expensive things about Until Dawn was motion capture and the facial models at the time. I don't remember how much they were, but I feel like they were like $250,000 or something at the time. And so the idea behind the Dark Pictures was, you'll have 1 or 2 people in each game that are like the ringer for that game, but the rest of the cast will be different actors, but the same models. And so that way you're putting an investment in the whole series, and each game's overhead is much lower. So like if you look at the Dark Pictures games, like the character models repeat throughout. I mean, there's only like 1 or 2 new faces in each game, which was really, like a really smart move of him to like shrink those budgets and like absorb the cost across like 6 games versus like Until Dawn, which was like a third of the budget or something probably.